We were told categorically there was no parents' race.
Right.
But then they called the last minute parents' race. And
She has never put a foot wrong. Not once. Not in over a decade inside the most watched institution on Earth. Every gesture is calculated, every expression managed. Every public appearance is a masterclass in composure that has made Catherine the most disciplined royal of her generation. And then Camilla crossed a line, and something in Catherine shifted. Visibly, deliberately, in a way that every senior royal in that room understood immediately for exactly what it was. This was not a mistake. This was not nerves or fatigue or an off day. This was a woman who had absorbed everything she was going to absorb and was done pretending otherwise. The palace has not been the same since. The woman who never breaks protocol. Until now. What makes this story genuinely extraordinary? Because it is easy to read a headline about a royal protocol breach and file it alongside the endless stream of palace drama that circulates on any given week. Easy to assume it is another round of the same tired narrative. Another manufactured tension between people who are required to coexist and occasionally find it difficult. This is not that. To understand why Catherine breaking protocol is a genuinely significant event, you have to first understand what Catherine's relationship with protocol actually is. What has always been, and what it has cost her personally to maintain it at the level she has maintained it for over a decade. Catherine Middleton walked into this institution as a commoner. That word gets used casually, but its weight inside the monarchy is anything but casual. She had no royal blood, no institutional training from birth, no lifetime of preparation for the specific and relentless demands of life inside the most scrutinized family on earth. She came from a comfortable but entirely ordinary background and was handed, on the day of her wedding, one of the most complex and demanding roles in public life. And she has never once in the year since given the watching world a moment it could use against her. Think about what that actually requires. Every public appearance is a performance that cannot slip. Every interaction with the press is a negotiation that must look effortless. Every family gathering that takes place in any degree of public view is a management exercise disguised as a normal human moment.
The brackets are all broken. Is that McEnroe style
it
ending?
becomes a mental challenge
Really?
between the two.
The smile must be genuine enough to read as authentic and controlled enough to reveal nothing. The body language must be warm but never familiar. The words, on the rare occasions she speaks to the press, must be considered enough to be uncontroversial and natural enough not to read as scripted.
You know, they've been great over the years, helping me with, difficult times.
She has sustained that performance through things that would have broken most people. Through the early years of intense media scrutiny, when every photograph of her was dissected for signs of weight loss, or weight gain, or happiness, or unhappiness. Through the adjustment to royal life that sources close to her have described as far lonelier and far more disorienting than the fairy tale version suggests. Through pregnancies conducted entirely in the public eye.
We don't have any secrets, and really better we share everything with everyone.
Through the collapse of her brother-in-law's marriage in full global view and all the institutional turbulence that created. Through her own health crisis earlier this year. The cancer diagnosis, the treatment, the months of absence from public duties that generated its own storm of speculation and scrutiny that she was required to manage with dignity while simultaneously being genuinely unwell. Through all of it, not a single significant public misstep, not one. That record is not an accident. It is the product of extraordinary personal discipline maintained over an extraordinary length of time under extraordinary pressure. People who know Catherine well describe someone who understands instinctively that in her position, the performance is not separate from the role. It is the role. That every departure from the expected, however small, carries consequences that ripple outward in ways that cannot always be predicted or controlled. She knows this better than anyone. She has lived it every day for over a decade, which is precisely why what happened matters as much as it does. Because a woman who understands all of that, who has demonstrated that understanding consistently and without exception across years of sustained public life, that woman does not break protocol by accident. She does not have an off day that produces an unguarded moment the cameras happen to catch. The level of discipline required to maintain what she has maintained for this long does not simply lapse. When Catherine breaks protocol, it is because she has decided to break it. That decision, the moment a woman of that discipline and that awareness chooses to depart from the behavior that has defined her public life. That is the story, not the breach itself. The decision behind it. And to understand that decision, you have to understand what has been building between Catherine and Camilla in the period leading up to this moment. Because it did not arrive from nowhere. Nothing in this family ever does.
I'm so glad that I've had the time to to grow and understand myself more.
The relationship between Catherine and Camilla has always been more complex than the official version presents. Publicly, it has been warm. Photographed warmth, coordinated proximity. The appearance of two women who respect each other's position and maintain a genuinely collegial relationship within the formal structures of the institution. Privately, sources who have observed both women in unguarded settings describe something more layered, more careful. The particular dynamic of two people who are required to get along and who are both skilled enough to do so in public, while privately maintaining a distance that never fully closes. Some of that distance is structural. Catherine is the future queen. Camilla is the current one. The relationship between those two positions is inherently complicated, regardless of the personalities involved. There is a question of precedence, of influence. Who shapes what inside a household that is simultaneously a family and a constitutional institution with defined hierarchies that do not always match the informal power dynamics operating beneath them. And some of that distance is personal. Catherine is protective of William, of her children, of the specific version of this institution that she is building toward and that she intends to define on her own terms when the time comes. She does not extend her inner circle easily. She does not trust quickly. And she notices with the acuity of someone who has spent years reading Rooms for Survival when something is being done that does not sit right.
Careful. My hand's in there.
She has been noticing things for a while now. The specific accumulation of incidents that led to this moment has not been fully reported anywhere. Pieces of it have surfaced in various accounts. Pattern of behavior from Camilla around certain decisions. Around access, around the boundaries between her current position and the space that rightly belongs to the next generation. Small things individually. The kind of things that can be explained away one by one as misunderstandings or differences of approach, or the inevitable friction of a large and complicated family managing a large and complicated institution. But they do not exist one by one. They exist as a pattern. And Catherine, who is not someone given to dramatic reactions or impulsive responses, had been watching that pattern build. She had been absorbing it, managing it, finding ways to work around it and within it without allowing it to break the surface of the public performance. And then something happened that she apparently decided she was no longer willing to absorb. Something that crossed a line that the previous incidents had approached but not quite reached. Something that landed in a place that was too close, too personal, too directly in conflict with things Catherine holds as non-negotiable in a life full of negotiated compromises. What exactly that something was, we are going to get to. But understanding that it did not happen in isolation, that it landed on top of years of quiet, managed, dignified patience that had finally reached its limit. That is the context without which the protocol breach makes no sense. With it, the protocol breach makes complete sense. It was not a mistake, it was a message. And inside the palace, everybody received it. Camilla crossed the line. What actually happened? There is a version of Camilla that the palace has spent years carefully constructing. Warm, witty, disarmingly self-deprecating. A woman who earned her place through patience and persistence and a genuine commitment to the institution rather than through any sense of entitlement. The rehabilitation narrative depends entirely on this version being believed. And for a significant portion of the public, it has been believed. Successfully enough that the woman who was once the most unpopular figure in Britain now sits on a throne with approval ratings that would have seemed impossible 20 years ago.
Happy Mummy's Day. There we are, these pinky.
But there is another version, one that surfaces in private accounts from people who have worked inside the palace, who have observed the dynamics behind the formal occasions and the managed photographs, who have watched how Camilla operates in spaces where the performance of humility is not required because there is no public audience to perform it for. That version is considerably less straightforward.
Thank you very much. I'm going to turn my back.
Sources who have spent time close to the inner workings of the royal household describe a woman who is acutely aware of her position and its implications, who understands the informal levers of palace power with a sophistication that her public persona deliberately underplays, who has used her proximity to Charles not just as a wife but as an operator, someone who knows which conversations to have and when, which decisions to quietly influence and which to leave visibly alone, how to shape outcomes from a position that officially holds no institutional authority beyond the title itself.
And I've never been able to master the art of mimicry.
That kind of operation is not unusual in powerful households. It is arguably inevitable when someone of intelligence occupies a position of proximity to power. The question is not whether it happens. It is how it is exercised and whether the people affected by it are able to do anything about it. For Catherine, the answer to that second question has historically been to manage it, to observe and note and file away without reacting, to maintain the performance of the collegial relationship that the institution requires, while privately keeping a very clear account of what is actually happening around her. That accounting has been running for years, and the entries, apparently, have been adding up. The specific incidents that sources point to as part of the pattern cover several distinct areas. The first involves the children. George, Charlotte, and Louis occupy a position in the monarchy's future that makes them, quite aside from being Catherine's children, significant institutional figures. Decisions about their education, their public exposure, their preparation for the roles they will eventually inhabit, these are decisions that belong to their parents, specifically and unambiguously.
We don't have any secrets, and really, better we share everything with everyone.
Sources describe a pattern of Camilla involving herself in conversations and considerations around the children in ways that Catherine found consistently overreaching, not dramatically, not in ways that could be easily called out without appearing oversensitive, but persistently, in the particular way that power operates when it is testing boundaries rather than overtly crossing them. Small suggestions that carried the weight of preference, passing comments that landed with the authority of someone who expected them to be acted upon, an interest in the children's development that went beyond the warmth of a step-grandmother into something that felt to Catherine like management. Catherine noticed. She always notices. And she said nothing. Because saying something would have required making an issue of something that could be denied. And making issues of deniable things is not how Catherine operates. She is patient. She is strategic. She waits. The second area involves the question of public positioning. The order of precedence in the monarchy is formal and clear, but the informal hierarchy, the question of who is perceived as central and who is perceived as adjacent in any given setting, is a different matter. And it is one that Camilla has apparently been navigating with considerable skill in ways that have not always worked in Catherine's favor. Sources describe specific public engagements, where the staging, the positioning, the allocation of prominence in photographs, and in the running order of events reflected choices that seemed to consistently advantage Camilla's visibility at Catherine's expense. Individually, each instance was explicable. Collectively, they formed a pattern that people close to Catherine recognized and discussed privately. Again, Catherine absorbed it, adjusted, maintained the surface. But the third area is where things moved from pattern to trigger. And this involves Catherine's health in the period surrounding her cancer diagnosis and treatment, a period of profound personal vulnerability that she navigated with a privacy and a dignity that the public ultimately respected once the full picture became clear.
It's been an incredibly tough couple of months for our entire family, but I've had a fantastic...
During that period, the expectation within the family, the basic human expectation regardless of institutional considerations, was that it would be treated with the sensitivity it deserved, that the conversations around her absence, her capacity, her return to duties, would be handled with care and with the kind of protective instinct that family is supposed to provide in moments of genuine crisis.
In January, I underwent major abdominal surgery in London.
Sources suggest that not everyone inside those walls met that expectation. The specific nature of what Camilla allegedly said or did during this period has not been fully reported publicly. What is filtered through from people familiar with the situation is that conversations occurred and positions were communicated in ways that Catherine, upon learning of them, found deeply and personally offensive. Not institutionally inconvenient, and not professionally frustrating, personally offensive, in the way that only things that touch on your most vulnerable moments and your deepest relationships can be: information about her health, conversations about her capacity to perform duties, discussions about the implications of her absence for the institutional arrangements around her husband. These are not topics that should have been navigated by anyone other than the people most directly involved. And the suggestion that they were navigated by someone with their own interests in the outcome is the thing that apparently crossed the line that everything else had only approached.
Those days are long days, and you know, I think if I know I'm working.
Because Catherine has operated inside this institution with the understanding that certain things are sacred: her marriage, her children, her health, the private core of a life that is, in almost every other dimension, public property. She has given almost everything to the performance this institution demands, but she has held those things back, protected them. She considered them beyond the reach of the institutional maneuvering that governs everything else, to have them apparently reached in anyway, by someone whose formal position carries no authority over any of them. That is not institutional friction. That is a violation of something Catherine considers fundamental, and the reaction it produced was not the careful, managed, strategic patience that has defined her entire public life. It was something rawer than that, something that bypassed the usual processing and landed directly in the place where Catherine's instinct for protection lives: protection of her family, of her children, of the private self that she has defended with extraordinary discipline against an institution that routinely consumes private selves entirely. When that protection instinct fires in someone who has been disciplined for this long, it does not produce a measured response. It produces a decisive one. And decisive, in Catherine's case, does not mean loud. It does not mean confrontational in the direct way that Princess Anne is confrontational. It means something more refined and, in many ways, more devastating.
I think, you know, everyone who I work with, I think, can see that I'm there.
It means a public act, calibrated, unmistakable to the people it is aimed at, wrapped in enough plausible ambiguity that it cannot be formally objected to, while being completely unambiguous to anyone who knows what preceded it. It means breaking protocol on purpose, in front of everyone. The protocol. Break. What Catherine did and what it communicated. Understand something about royal protocol before we get into what happened. It is not etiquette. It is not a list of polite suggestions that senior royals observe because it makes events run smoothly. Royal protocol is a language, a precise, centuries-old system of communication that operates through gesture and positioning and precedence, and the specific choreography of who stands where and who defers to whom and in what order and in what manner. Every person who has spent serious time inside this institution is fluent in that language. They read it in real time. They understand the difference between an oversight and a statement, between a momentary lapse and a deliberate departure, between someone who forgot the rules and someone who knows the rules so completely that breaking one of them is the most controlled and deliberate act they could possibly perform. Catherine is fluent. She has been fluent for years, and what she did was not a lapse. The specific nature of the protocol breach has been described by sources familiar with the occasion in careful terms. Careful because the people who were present understand what they witnessed and are equally aware of the implications of having it fully documented on record. But enough has emerged to construct a clear picture of what happened and why it hit the way it did. The occasion was a formal royal engagement, the kind where the order of precedence governs everything. Who enters first, who is positioned where, who receives acknowledgement in what sequence. These are not trivial details. In the language of the monarchy, they are the substance of the communication, the statement being made to the room and to the institution about who holds what position and what that position is worth. Catherine departed from the expected order, deliberately and visibly, in a way that repositioned her relative to Camilla in the formal hierarchy of the moment. Not aggressively, not in a manner that could be captured in a photograph and presented as an obvious act of hostility, but unmistakably in the particular way that people who are fluent in protocol communicate through it rather than simply within it. She moved differently than she was supposed to move. She acknowledged differently than the formal sequence required. She created, through a series of small and precisely executed departures from the expected choreography, a public picture of the relationship between herself and Camilla that did not match the official version. The people in that room saw it. Every one of them. The senior royals, the aides, the officials whose job it is to know exactly what the choreography should look like, and who therefore noticed immediately when it looked like something else. Nobody said anything. Nobody intervened. Nobody produced a correction that acknowledged what had just occurred. Because to acknowledge, it would be to confirm it. And confirming it would mean having a conversation that nobody in that room was prepared to have officially. So the moment simply existed, witnessed by everyone, addressed by no one, filed away in the permanent institutional memory that palaces accumulate and never formally document. Now, there is a question about William that sits at the center of this and demands a direct answer. Did he know? Sources familiar with the situation suggest that the answer is more complicated than a simple yes or no. William and Catherine are not two people who operate independently of each other inside the institution. They are a unit, the central unit around which the monarchy's future is being built. Their coordination on matters of institutional significance is not occasional. It is constant, deliberate, the product of a marriage that is also, in the most practical sense, a partnership of two people who understand exactly what they are building and why. So the idea that Catherine would make a deliberate and significant public departure from protocol without any awareness on William's part sits uncomfortably against everything we know about how they operate together. But being aware in advance and coordinated in advance are different things. There is a version of this where William knew the temperature Catherine had reached, knew that she was approaching a point where the performance of accommodation was no longer something she could sustain, and made a decision, not necessarily stated explicitly, that if she reached that point and chose to act, he would not prevent it. That version is more consistent with William's character than the idea of a jointly scripted public statement. He does not do jointly scripted public statements. He does something more subtle and more effective. He removes obstacles. He creates space. He ensures that when the person beside him decides to move, there is nothing in the way. And in the moment of the protocol breach itself, William's response confirmed exactly that dynamic. He did not correct her. He did not create the physical or social distance from her action that would have communicated discomfort or disapproval. He moved with her, not identically, not in a way that made him the co-author of the statement, but in the subtle physical language of someone who is aligned with what is happening and is making that alignment legible to the people in the room who are fluent enough to read it. To Camilla, in that moment, the message from both of them would have been clear, not because anything was said, because nothing needed to be said. The choreography said it all. You have gone too far, and we are no longer going to perform as though you have not. The effect on Camilla has been described by sources as significant, not visibly, not in any way that produced a public reaction that added to the moment. She is too experienced and too controlled for that. She maintained her composure with the practiced facility of someone who has been maintaining composure in hostile environments for most of her adult life. But composure is a surface, and beneath the surface, by all accounts, something registered that has not been easily processed in the weeks since. Because what Catherine did was not an attack. Attacks can be defended against. This was something more unsettling than an attack. It was a revelation, a public demonstration of a private truth that Camilla had perhaps believed was more contained than it apparently is. The truth that Catherine has a line, that the line has been crossed, and that the version of the Princess of Wales who absorbs everything gracefully and indefinitely and without consequence, is not the complete version of who Catherine actually is. The complete version, apparently, is someone who, when pushed far enough, responds with something far more sophisticated than anger. Respond with clarity, with the particular devastating precision of someone who knows exactly what they are doing and exactly what it will communicate and exactly who will understand it. In over a decade of public life, Catherine has given the monarchy composure, dedication, and an almost superhuman commitment to the performance of unity, even when the reality behind it was considerably more complicated. What she gave them in that room was something different. She gave them a warning, not delivered in private, not filtered through advisors or managed through back channels, delivered in public, in the language that the institution itself invented and that she has spent years becoming fluent in. And in that language, what she said was completely unambiguous. This is where my patience ends. Do not test what comes next, what comes after, and why Camilla should be concerned. The numbers, not financial numbers, people numbers. The working royals, who constitute the active face of the institution, are fewer than they have ever been in the modern era. Harry and Meghan, are gone. Andrew is gone in any meaningful public sense. The burden of representing the crown falls on a smaller group of people than at any point in recent memory. And within that smaller group, the center of gravity is unmistakable. It is William and Catherine.
Soon worked out for the better.
And I think I at the time, wasn't very happy.
They are not just the future of the monarchy. They are increasingly the operational present of it, the engagements, the international representation, the domestic visibility that keeps the institution connected to the public it depends on for its legitimacy. All of it is resting more heavily on their shoulders with every passing month. And that weight, rather than diminishing their position, has been consolidating it, giving them a standing inside the institution that goes beyond the formal hierarchy of their titles into something more substantial and more durable. Influence earned through indispensability is a different kind of influence from influence conferred through marriage or position. It is harder to challenge, harder to quietly erode, harder to maneuver around in the informal ways that palace politics normally operates. Catherine's influence, built across years of that kind of indispensable service, is of the harder variety, and Camilla, whose influence is relational rather than foundational, is in a structurally weaker position than the surface comparison of their titles might suggest. Now layer the health context over that structural picture. Charles's illness is the variable that changes every calculation in real time. The palace communications around his condition have been carefully managed, reassuring without being specific, positive without making promises that these situation may not allow to be kept. What sources close to the household describe privately is a king who is managing his duties with genuine courage and genuine difficulty simultaneously, who has good periods and harder periods, whose long-term trajectory remains uncertain in ways that require everyone around him to be quietly preparing for possibilities that nobody will discuss publicly. In that environment, the question of who holds real institutional authority is not academic. It is urgent. And the answer to that question increasingly points in a direction that does not center on Camilla. William is effectively the operational anchor of the monarchy's future. Catherine is his partner in that role in every meaningful sense. The decisions being made about the direction of the institution, about its public positioning, about which relationships and which values will define the next chapter of the crown. Those decisions are being shaped by William and Catherine in ways that are becoming more visible and more consequential with every passing month. Camilla's position in that future has always depended on the warmth of the people who will determine it, and the warmth from both William and Catherine, as the events of recent months have made increasingly clear, is not unconditional. It never was. People assumed it more than they verified it. The atmosphere between Catherine and Camilla in the weeks since the protocol breach has been described by sources close to both women in notably similar terms from both directions. Formal, correct. The surface is maintained with professional precision because the institution requires the surface to be maintained regardless of what exists beneath it. But beneath it, the distance is real and it is not closing. Catherine has not made any public statement about what happened. She has not briefed against Camilla through the usual channels of unnamed sources and carefully positioned leaks. That is not how she operates. She made her statement in that room, in the language she chose to make it in. And she has returned to the composure and the discipline that have always defined her public presence. But composure after a line has been drawn is different from the composure of someone who has not yet drawn it. The first is endurance. The second is position. Catherine is now operating from position, and everyone inside those walls can feel the difference. For Camilla, the practical implications of this shift extend well beyond the personal discomfort of a strained relationship with her stepson's wife. They extend into the fabric of her daily existence inside the institution, the access, the conversations she is included in, and the ones she is not. The degree to which her preferences and perspective shape outcomes in the informal spaces where the monarchy's real decisions get made. All of that depends on relationships, on warmth, on the goodwill of the people who control access to the rooms where things happen. And the two people who will increasingly control access to those rooms have made their position clear, not through any dramatic gesture, through the accumulated weight of a private meeting where Anne spoke and William backed her, through a public moment where Catherine broke protocol deliberately and William moved with her, through the quiet, sustained signals that people who are fluent in this institution's language read without difficulty. The signals say the same thing from every direction, the next reign is being built. It has its values and its priorities and its understanding of what this institution should be and who should have influence within it. And that understanding, as currently constituted, does not extend to Camilla the degree of informal authority she has come to rely on. She still has her title. Nobody is taking the crown off her head. The formal courtesies will be observed because the institution demands that they be observed, and the people running it are too disciplined to allow anything else. But formal courtesy and genuine inclusion are not the same thing. And Camilla, who is sophisticated enough to understand every dimension of that distinction, will understand what she is being offered and what she is no longer being offered. The question that remains is what she does with that understanding. Whether she recalibrates, pulls back from the overreach that apparently triggered this response, finds a way to exist within the boundaries that are being drawn around her position with increasing clarity from multiple directions simultaneously, or whether she pushes, again, tests the line that Catherine just drew, assumes that the performance of unity that the institution demands will continue to protect her from the consequences of continuing as she has been. If she makes that assumption, she is miscalculating in a way she will not be able to quietly recover from. Because the woman who just broke protocol to send a message is not the woman who will absorb the next provocation in silence. She already told the room what comes next. She just did it in a language that only the people who needed to understand it could read. Camilla read it. The question is whether she believed it. She should. Catherine has spent over a decade giving this institution everything it asked for. The composure, the discipline, the performance of unity, even when the reality behind it was anything but unified. And then Camilla crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. What happened in that room was not a mistake. It was not a bad day or a momentary lapse. It was a woman who had absorbed everything she was going to absorb, drawing a line in the only language the palace truly understands. The new rules are being written right now, inside those walls, behind those closed doors, and Catherine is the one holding the pen. If this story hits differently, hit subscribe, because the next chapter of this is already in motion.